When we think about the collapse of a democracy, we usually imagine tanks in the streets and the sudden, violent seizure of a capital. But historically, the dismantling of a constitutional system is often a quiet, bureaucratic process. After the First World War, the Weimar Republic established a democracy defined by competitive elections and representative institutions. However, by the early 1930s, severe economic distress and declining public confidence left those institutions dangerously exposed. Exploiting that instability, the Nazi Party built a mass movement that entered political life through a strictly constitutional process. Conservative elites, believing they could control Hitler from within the cabinet, appointed him chancellor in January 1933. A republic faces its ultimate threat when anti-democratic movements are granted the legal authority to govern by the very system they intend to destroy. In February 1933, the German parliament building was set on fire. The government immediately used the smoke and flames as justification for a national emergency, arguing that ordinary constitutional protections were obstacles to public safety. An emergency decree suspended legal rights to speech, assembly, privacy, and due process, allowing police to arrest political opponents. With the opposition silenced, the Enabling Act transferred legislative power to the executive, enacting laws without parliamentary approval. The democracy's own emergency failsafes had been weaponized to permanently concentrate power in a single office. Consolidating that power required purging the civil service. The regime removed officials considered politically unreliable and replaced them with party loyalists, ensuring that professional qualifications became subordinate to ideological conformity. The regime prioritized the capture of the judiciary to maintain a veneer of legal legitimacy. Compliant courts provided the administration with an air of respectability, converting political objectives into enforceable rules. Law was transformed into a selective weapon. While supporters of the regime received total protection, political opponents lost access to the most basic legal safeguards. When the referees of a system are captured, the legal system itself becomes the primary instrument of dictatorial repression. The strategy then moved to Gleichschaltung, or political coordination. Fascist movements view any autonomous organization, from unions to youth groups, as a direct competitor for a citizen's loyalty. Independent trade unions were abolished and replaced by a state-controlled labor organization. This gave the regime direct supervision over economic life, while denying workers any ability to bargain or strike. This coordination eventually absorbed universities, professional associations, and civic groups. Even historical memory was rewritten in schools to legitimize the regime and portray its opponents as enemies of the people. By erasing the boundaries between the state and personal life, the regime left citizens with no independent place to gather or think. To control the narrative, the state suppressed independent newspapers and turned the radio into an exclusive megaphone. Public ceremonies and mass rallies were used to create a single, unified story centered on the leader. Paramilitary violence, once committed by party thugs in the streets, merged into official state power. The police began to ignore attacks committed by regime supporters, while aggressively prosecuting any attempt at resistance. This selective enforcement created a climate of widespread fear. Because citizens could no longer predict which association would provoke punishment, they began practicing self-censorship to survive. Once truth is dictated and arbitrary violence is normalized, the state no longer needs to physically imprison an entire population to control it. The transition from democracy to dictatorship in the 1930s relied almost entirely on existing offices, administrative agencies, and legal procedures. The institutions were not destroyed, they were captured and redirected. This historical pattern mirrors modern democratic backsliding. Contemporary leaders frequently follow the same playbook, politicizing public administration, manipulating electoral rules to tilt the field, and portraying independent courts as obstacles to the will of the people. Institutional capture allows the outward shell of democracy, the elections and the legislatures, to remain visible long after their actual substance is gone. Democracy must be defended at the first sign of institutional erosion. Once the capture of the state is normalized, the legal system itself will prevent you from saving it.